We all woke up this morning, and we had with it the amazing return of our conscious mind. We recovered minds with a complete sense of self and a complete sense of our own existence. Yet we hardly ever pause to consider this wonder. That's a quote from Antonio Damasio, who studies cognitive neuroscience at the University of Southern California. The National Science Foundation estimates that humans have between 12 and 50,000 thoughts per day. And other estimates, not easily cited, go to the high extreme of 80,000. If we break this number down to the minute of a 24-hour day, we would come up with 8 to 56 thoughts a minute. The high side being almost 1 thought per second. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like I have that many thoughts a minute. And if I weren't careful, I might think myself a bit slow. Makes me think of the statement, when God gave out brains, I thought He said trains, and I missed mine. The trick, however, is to understand that this range of estimated thought that I just shared with you is a range of all thought, both conscious and unconscious thought. Based on an article I read at beingahuman.com, they claim that 98% of all thought is actually unconscious thought. And I'm now quoting things like keeping your heart beating, digesting food, processing sensory input, controlling and coordinating muscle action, and much more. And their reference was a book entitled The Mind's Past by Mikhail S. Gazzaniga. I expect you to remember that. So only about 2% of our thoughts are conscious, which also excludes much of what happens in the mind when sleeping. So, for the sake of today's instruction, if we assume an average of 8 hours of sleep a day, ignoring dreams as potential conscious thought, the math provides the following estimate on conscious thought over the remainder of the 16-hour day. 13 to 83 conscious thoughts an hour. The cited study from the National Science Foundation revealing 13 to 52. So it's a range. That's between 1 and 6 conscious thoughts every 4.5 minutes. For the sake of today's presentation, let's think even more slowly than the slowest estimate and round down to having only 1 conscious thought every 5 minutes, or 20 thoughts an hour. Not all conscious thought enters the realm of moral judgments, of course. We decide what to wear or to eat, when to go to bed, to pay the bills, do the math to properly pay the bills, and the list goes on and on. But some measure of those thoughts does enter that realm of morality. These thoughts we may keep to ourselves, or they may lead to words, or they may even lead to actions. It's this realm of conscious thought that is of special importance to today's discussion. Go ahead and turn to Proverbs, and we'll read in chapter 23. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 6. Do not eat the bread of a miser, nor desire his delicacies, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. The key phrase I want for you to take hold of this moment is, for as he thinks in his heart, so is he. It doesn't matter what he appears to be, it matters what he really is. Let's turn to the book of Psalms, Psalm chapter 10. Psalm chapter 10. And we'll read in verse 4. The wicked, in his proud countenance, does not seek God. God is in none of his thoughts. Here we are offered a proof that the wicked do not seek God, not even having God in their conscious thoughts. Now I'll just go ahead and quickly read Jeremiah 17:9 and 10, which is pretty well known by us. Verse 9, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings. We see here the state of the heart of mankind, and we're mankind. That's you and me, okay? And we see that from these thoughts, in this case, is described action. That's what what we do is based on what we think. In Genesis chapter 6 and verse 5, then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. This is right before the flood, the Noachian flood. And that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. This is getting depressing. And now in Matthew, in verse 37 of chapter 24, Jesus states, but as in the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. The state of the mind of mankind will be the same as it was before the flood, with evil thoughts continually. So in Jeremiah, we find a statement describing the state of conscious thought of humanity. Then in Genesis, we see a statement about the state of mind of mankind before the Lord sent the great flood on the earth. And we find that Jesus in Matthew informs us that the state of the mind of man will be the same when He returns. So the conscious thought of man is naturally drawn to poor moral judgments, leading to poor choices in word and deed. Don't we know? That's our nature. That's the way we are. The cards seem stacked against us. And that's what God has to work with. But the good news is that God is working with us to change our evil hearts. Let's turn to James, the book of James. And we'll read in chapter 4. Verse 7, therefore submit to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. This statement reveals to us that we are not helpless. We're not helpless. In the realm of managing or governing our conscious thought, we do have a choice. David advised his son Solomon concerning this very thing. I'm going to read from 1 Chronicles chapter 28 in verse 9. As for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve Him with a loyal heart and with a willing mind, for the Lord searches all hearts. This is what we heard in Jeremiah, and understands all the intent of the thoughts. If you seek Him, He will be found by you. But if you forsake Him, He will cast you off forever. And it's in these passages of James and 1 Chronicles we find our greatest advantage. Seek God. Seek God. Thousands upon thousands of books have been written to offer advice on success and self-fulfillment. But many of these books ignore the essential ingredient for true happiness, which is to seek God. It makes me think of Herbert Armstrong's book, The 7 Laws of Success. Some of you may be familiar with that book. I read it when I was a teenager. He goes through and explains 6 key qualities needed for success in this life. fix the right goal, education or preparation for that goal, good health, health adequate to achieve it, drive, determination to do it, resourcefulness, utilizing whatever's available to you to make it happen, and perseverance, never giving up. Okay? Never giving up. He then goes on to explain how many have achieved their goals, made money, attained status, and enjoyed passing pleasures. Yet, because they did not know about that seventh law, their lives were empty. What was that seventh law, according to Mr. Armstrong? Having contact with and the guidance and continuous help of God. We find again this connection in Philippians, and it's my go-to passage for conscious thought. Philippians chapter 4. Philippians chapter 4. It's one of my favorites. I've needed it a lot. Verse 4, rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to all men. The Lord is at hand. Be anxious for nothing. So, rejoicing is already an action, right? You're taking an action of conscious thought, and you're rejoicing in the Lord. That's a good thing. Gentleness is an action of thought. How you treat others. Being anxious for nothing, that means don't be anxious. Okay? These are qualities of conscious thought that are important, but in everything by prayer and supplication. So how do you avoid being anxious? Well, prayer and supplication has something to do with it, and thanksgiving. Well, what do I have to be thankful for? My life stinks. I mean, haven't you ever felt like that? I did. I'm not saying it did stink. I'm saying I felt like it stank. Okay? Well, think about this. Think about this one foundational thing. Each one of you in this room exists. Of course, obviously, because God created us all. But how? The man contributes between 40 and 100 million haploid cells to race for that egg, that other haploid cell. You won. A haploid cell came together with an egg and made you. That means between 39,999,999 other cells didn't make it. And they're never going to. You and I are here as winners. Okay? We exist. And every human being that has ever existed exists for the plan of God, which is to what? Become children of God. We know that now. Everybody will know that at some point in God's plan. Okay, so be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God, and the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, that is truth according to God, whatever things are noble, that's nobility as God defines it. Whatever things are just, you get the picture. Whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report. If there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. What is it to meditate? That is to set aside time, just like you would with prayer. Or with study, whether it's studying the Bible, studying something else. You set aside a block of time and you intentionally think about those things. Okay, that's conscious thought being utilized in meditation. So why would I bring up the statistics I brought up? All those numbers about how many times we think an hour or every 4.5 minutes. How does this factoid apply to today's instructions? Well, I've provided it for our encouragement. Because, as I close here, each of us has at least, this is if we're thinking as slow as you can go, Okay, as slow as you can go, each of us has at least 320 opportunities every single day of our life to grasp tightly righteous thought, which leads to righteous action, overcoming at the speed of thought. So I will end with a question. And I can reserve a good number of those 320 thoughts every day to ask myself this question as a constant reminder. You know, if I have 320 thoughts, I can ask myself some of those thoughts. I can remember this, and I want you to remember this. What will I do with my next conscious thought?